We are.
It is time for the Vandy report card following their opener Saturday night, which went off about an hour and a half late because of all the weather. So let's run. Well, I tell you what, go back, take that off there for a minute. Can we go to the kickoff return first?
Yes.
Let's do that.
9 years, baby. 9 years.
Yeah, you're right, Kelly. Since I think it was 2014, Darius Sims had two kickoff returns actually against South Carolina. But this guy right here, Jade McGowan, is the fastest player on the team. I think he reached almost 23 miles per hour, something crazy, or maybe it was 22 on this run back. I mean, it was crazy. I looked over at one of the other riders in the booth, and I said, there was no one on that side.
Oh, there wasn't.
Look, everybody's on the right side. After this, he had one guy to beat, and it was the kicker.
The poor kicker never had a chance. He might as well have stayed at the Marriott.
He didn't need 54 to block for him there. I mean, Hawaii had everybody on that one side, and this was made easy. But he's a legit player. Now, he's only a sophomore. Came out of South Carolina. He has legit speed.
So the whole stay in your lane didn't really apply to Hawaii.
No, it was stay on one side of the field and not cover that other side.
So this gave Vandy an early start. Let's go to the positives and the negatives. And let's start on the positive side. Kelly, I think A.J. Swan is the least of their issues. I think this kid's really good.
You know what, George? I was quite impressed the other night. His very first pass was a little shaky, but I will say this, and I was thinking about this all day. It rained the other night, George, and I'm going to be honest with you. When I was playing and it rained, I had the old Troy Aikman syndrome. I listened to Troy Aikman talk about rain throwing a football, and I remember I was playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, and it was in Cleveland, and we were killing those guys in the first half. I was throwing the ball all over the place, had good protection. Everybody was doing what we're supposed to do. We come out, and it starts raining. And I remember my butthole puckered up, and the first pass that I threw coming out at halftime, I threw it about 15 yards over my intended receiver's head because it just squeezed out of my hand. Now, I made it through the game, but I was thinking about when you're a young guy, as A.J. Swan is, and you come out, I think he completed like 10 in a row at some point. Am I right, Billy, about that?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he was pretty efficient.
He was really efficient. He spread the ball around a bunch of those young wide receivers, and I thought he looked really good, George. I'd give him an A. I don't want to go A plus, but I would give him an A because I thought he managed the offense well. I thought he threw the ball good. There's a couple, and I was thinking the same thing about the Hawaii guy. There was a couple of times where, and it happens in every game, and it happens in pro games, but it's just funny to see college guys go versus a pro guy where a guy has to jump up and catch the ball, where if it's a pro guy, he hits him in stride and he can make something out of it. Well, there was a couple of times where guys were they would catch the ball, it was high or something, and they would have to fall, and they got no yak yards. But that comes with experience, and that comes with playing. But overall, I thought the guy looked really well. He's a big kid. Didn't have to run around any. I thought he got some good protection, and he was able to get rid of the football and throw it on time and to get his guys out in space. I thought he did a really good job.
Billy, isn't there a streak he's on right now of throws in a row without a pick?
I think you're right.
And it's a lengthy one.
It is. Yeah, I think it's the South Carolina game from last year, I want to say.
When you see that trait in a young player who has not had a ton of playing time, that's really good.
Yeah.
Number two for me was their biggest strength to me in numbers is now wide receivers. Will Shepherd is clearly a big-time number one. But, Billy, they've got some kids behind him, and I'm thinking in particular of the young guy from CPA who can fly.
Mm-hmm.
They have amassed some depth there.
They have. London Humphreys had a touchdown, his first collegiate catch, the kid out of CPA. They've also got some good depth. Junior Sherrill, a kid coming out of Lipscomb Academy, is a talent. Jade McGowan, as you saw in the kickoff return there, he played a little bit of running back as well. They like Quincy Skinner, Gamarion Carter. They've got some legit depth there. I think that's a top half room in the SEC, and if they can protect Swan, they can do some things this year. But it's a big if, and you saw that against Hawaii. We'll get to that.
Now, the third is just my little pet peeve. If you can you go back and show us their uniform? Because what they have done is they have taken what I thought was kind of a puke gold, which was more of a Purdue that had very little color to it, and they have jazzed it up big time. Over the years, I have thought Vandy has worn some of the worst looking uniforms in college football. And Saturday night, I was like, yes, that's what they need to look like. So, Kelly, I realize that's just my little pet peeve, but this is a much better uniform. You're not going to show it to us, are you?
Well, that's a look at it there, but you can't. I know
that
you can't
doesn't
see
really
the pants.
tell me much.
You
can't go back to the touchdown?
The video's not playing for some reason right now.
So that's a tragedy.
Oh, well, that's shocking, Billy. That's shocking. George, I'm not as optimistic about those uniforms as you are. Of course, you're a Vandy guy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a little bit of the? Is that
black with blue?
No, I mean I understand that, but like it's still looking a little pukey looking to me, man. I don't know. It's just I guess if you like it, George, you're a Vandy guy. Hey, go for it. Whatever.
Now to the problems. Number one, this one surprised me. They couldn't run a lick on Hawaii. And for me, that is a red flag because this is a team now. Make no mistake, Hawaii's better than they were. A year ago, they were god-awful. They were one of the 5 to 10 worst teams in Division I. Kelly, I thought they'd be able to run the ball, and the truth of it is they never got anything going.
Yeah, I don't think it was very consistent, George. They did have a couple of good runs, but when you're playing a team like Hawaii where you beat them really bad last year, and like you just said, they have gotten better. But you know that the brutal schedule that they're going to have here in a couple of weeks, and they've got to be able to run the game or to have a good running game to take some of the pressure off of AJ Swan. And if you can run the ball a little bit, then it presents some play action opportunities for yourself. And they hit a couple of those the other night. But I just don't think the consistency was there, George. They hit a couple that they had some good runs on, but they just couldn't do it consistently. And you would think against a Hawaii team that you beat up so bad last year that's one thing you could do. You could be consistent in the run game, and I just never saw it.
The pass defense is a concern, although Hawaii, I thought, had a very good quarterback. I was impressed with that young man. Vandy had some pass rush, which is different than in most years where they've had none out of their front four. But, Billy, they got – I think in the first half alone they gave up 6 20-yard-plus plays, and that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, Hawaii outgained Vanderbilt by a pretty decently wide margin. They had 351 passing yards, 391 total. So credit to Braden Shager, but I don't know that I don't think Shager should have looked that good against an SEC defense. I mean, he had all day to throw most times. Now, Vandy, I think they got 3 sacks on him. But as you said, Kel, I mean, they did a little bit on the defensive line, but they didn't get nearly enough pressure on Shager. I mean, they were not getting in close enough to him, and they might send a couple of blitzes here and there, but they weren't getting home. So
that was the one. Yeah, that was the one thing that I saw, Billy. Like you just talked about, they did get some pressure at times when they needed it, but it wasn't consistent. And he was back there. He looked like he was able to eat a little bit, eat a snack back there sometimes when he was back there, and he was able to find some guys and made some good passes deep down the field. So some corners got beat pretty bad. You just can't let guys like that get behind you. Now that's stuff like that's going to happen in a game, but just lack of a pass rush consistently, just kind of like the run game up front offensively. You got to be in the SEC. You got to be able to get pass rush on some of these quarterbacks, and they just weren't able to do it very consistently the other night.
The third one to me is a program that is not used to this. They get
Yeah.
up 35-14, and they've got a chance to drop the hammer. And they didn't drop the hammer. Not only does Hawaii score twice in the fourth quarter to get it to the final of 35-28, but they've got the ball back with 2 minutes left in the game. And, that's simply you got to drop the hammer when you've got a team in trouble. You got to dust them. And they didn't.
Yeah, I agree with that, George. But that comes with winning. That comes with experience winning. And that's unfortunately that's what Vanderbilt has not been able to do for a very long time. So that'll come if they can stack some wins. They can understand they're in those situations. It's just like a golfer. First time he gets put on a Masters Sunday in the final group, and he's not ready for that. He's never felt that. He's never felt all the pressure and the experience of that. By just doing it helps. So I think that'll come. I really like listening to a lot of the things that Clark Lee has talked about. It's a process, and we always that word is overused to me a bunch. Everything is a process. We get it. We understand that. But at Vanderbilt, it's true. And he said the other day in an interview, he gets tired of people talking about, well, you went 5-7. That was a good year for Vandy. He gets tired of hearing that, and I can understand that. He and Barton Simmons coming back here, they knew what they were getting themselves into, and I think he's on the right track. I really do. They're still going to have a lot of growing pains. I don't know how they'll do this year, but I don't think you can. It was kind of a litmus test. It was raining. The weather affected a little bit, but Hawaii was better than they were last year, and they were not going to get beat like that. But just to get that first win under your belt, I think that killer instinct comes with winning, George, and we'll see how it goes in the future.
And that's the biggest difference right now between a Vandy and a Georgia, right? Georgia gets up 35-14. That because Vandy was up 35-14. And you sort of felt, okay, Vandy's got the momentum. They could win this thing, 48, 42-17, something like that, like a lot of people expected. And Georgia does that, right? They go and win, 42-14 instead of letting Hawaii get back in it and hang in there and only win 35-28. They had an onside kick that was almost recovered. And it was recovered by Hawaii, but the guy was out of bounds. Yeah. Hawaii gets the ball with a chance to tie it if they get that onside kick. So Vandy really escaped disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
The best thing in this is that it was left-hand column, W.
Yeah.
So let me ask both of y'all this. They play Alabama A&M on Saturday, and I don't know the first thing about it, Alabama A&M. Not going to pretend to, and I'm not going to pretend to believe that I'll have a lot more answers about their football team after Saturday. But what is it you use this for besides getting a win? What things do you use that makes this really meaningful?
I think just building off what you did with your quarterback and your receivers. I mean, Swan was able to consistently find Shepard, McGowan. You saw the touchdown to London Humphreys, so build off that. But George, I think there's more. I say there's not a ton to build on. There's things to build on, but there's more corrections, right? This is gonna be a huge week for film study, and I think Clark Lee is thanking the heavens that they get Alabama A&M instead of
Alabama.
Yeah, but instead of the road trip to Wake this week, right? Because you get another week, you get 2 weeks basically to prepare. I know you got to prepare for A&M, but it's Alabama A&M, So I think that this comes at a good time, and they've got a lot to figure out. But I think they've also got some things to build on. Swan, you got to protect Swan though. I think and we said that before the season, right? This season's going to come down to them protecting AJ Swan, and if they can do that, I think they got a chance at a bowl game. If they don't, I think they're right back to sort of square one type of stuff.
Yeah, I just think you go back to fundamentals, George. You go back to corrections. You go back and look and see what you did good, see what you did bad in the games, and you try to build off. You just try to work on your weaknesses and things like that. You can't let people behind you. There's two things that I was going to talk about too. AJ Swan. Really, the bad thing was I think they got the ball back with like 4 minutes left, and That's when the good New England Patriots team back in the day, when Tom Brady had the ball, they would not let you have the ball back. And you've got to be able to do that. I think he had a couple of incompletions in a row there when he could have sealed the deal of the game. And then you allow those guys to get another opportunity. And that deal right before, well, I think it was in the first quarter where the Hawaii QB threw an interception in the end zone. If he doesn't throw an interception, they score. Because they score. I think they scored the play before, and then they got something happen. I think it was a penalty. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
It was a penalty. I think it was a procedure penalty. But just think about that. That's 35-35, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean, you're expected to win that game, and if they tie the game up, man, buttholes are going to pucker up, George, and especially when you're supposed to win a game. So you got to be able to finish it. You talk about that killer instinct. You got to be able to finish it. But there's a lot of good things that they did in the game. I'm with Billy. I don't like. I mean, they kept him upright a few times, or most of the time, but there was a few times where Hawaii's defensive line was able to put a lot of pressure. And I told my wife, I'm like, because we were watching the game, I'm like, golly, they got to shore up that protection, because this is not an SEC team. This is Hawaii, who they beat like 63-7 last year. So there's a long road ahead, but there were some good things that Clark Lee obviously is going to overemphasize this week.
Well, and George and Kelly, you know this too. Vanderbilt is not used to being so fortunate in games like this, right?
Yeah.
This is the type of game that they might lose under, I know we bring up Coach Mason, but they might, this is a game they might lose, but I think there's a little something to be said about the way they did. Just, we're not losing, right? You felt a little bit like, I know it's close, but they weren't going to lose. And it's always easier watching film after a win like that, right?
Absolutely.
Or any type of win, right? After a loss, then things really escalate, right? Yeah. So I think there's some good, but more bad over anything.